Anyone at all familiar with the RazörForce deep lore is at least dimly aware that I've been doing the political punditry thing since before I could finally grow a full beard. Last week. But if a conservatarian inculcation via radio pioneers like Michael Savage or Rusty Humphreys was my innocent first date titty touch, it wasn't until delving deeply into the works of Barry Goldwater and the almighty Pat Buchanan that I at last slid into third base. But there was one work that blew the back of my head off like an overrated meth addict president. A book that at the time hit me like a bolt from the Blade Runner universe. Quote, "In half a lifetime, many Americans have seen their God dethroned, their heroes defiled, their culture polluted, their values assaulted, their country invaded, and themselves demonized as extremists and bigots for holding on to beliefs that Americans have held for generations. To make us love our country ought to be lovely," said Burke. "In too many ways, America is no longer lovely. Though she remains a great country, many wonder if she is still a good country. Some feel she is no longer their country. We did not leave America, they say. America left us." As Euripides writes, "There is no greater sorrow on earth than the loss of one's native land," the introduction excoriated. What if I told you that in the pages to follow, from population collapse to third world refugee crises and the social destabilization attendant to such, this book addressed and prescribed a cure for it all? And what if I told you that it was published in the year 2002? Friends, Fistians, let us part the pages of Pat Buchanan's post-millennial masterpiece, comparing each major prediction with the present, and discuss how and why Pat predicted the post-apocalyptic political future in the pages of The Death of the West. Start with a few choice nuggets Pat predicted outright. For example, the European refugee crisis, an ongoing great replacement in the old country. Quote, "There is a terrible dilemma confronting the first world nations. At present birth rates, Europe must bring in 169 million immigrants by 2050 if it wishes to keep its population aged 16 to 64 at today's level. But if Europe wishes to keep its present ratio of 4.8 workers, ages 15 to 64, for every senior, Europe must bring in 1.4 billion immigrants from Africa and the Middle East." Hey, remind me again where those refugee rape gangs all came from? Belgium, was it? Put another way, Europe either raises taxes and radically downsizes pensions and health benefits for the elderly, or Europe becomes a third world continent. There is no third way. Unquote. That chill down the back of your spine is not early onset MS. It's the certain knowledge of precisely what path Europe chose and continues to choose, subsidizing the wizened and wart-covered at the expense of the young. But if Pat was a political prophet on the subject of population trends, he was Demographstradamus. Pat's lowest prediction for the turnover of Texas from white to Latino was that by 2005, less than half the state would be a bad dancer American. Instead, we overshot his estimate by nearly a year, and today, Texas sits at less than 39% white, meaning Texas, who once sacrificed its bravest sentries on the ramparts of the Alamo to fight back forced conversion, has now invited Santa Anna over because he promised to pick our fucking fruit. Nationally, Pat was no less prescient, saying that by 2020, America's white population could go, and I quote, as low as 61%. Once again, reality overshot Pat's prophetic utterance. At 57.8% white by 2020, and 56.3% today. Indeed, this may be the most alarming aspect of all. Many of the most dire predictions Pat made, we're not only on schedule for, we may actually be ahead of the catastrophe curve. The Death of the West opens by stating, quote, "The prognosis is grim. Between 2000 and 2050, world population will grow by more than 3 billion to over 9 billion people, but this 50% increase in global population will come entirely from Asia, Africa, and Latin America as 100 million people of European stock vanish from the face of the earth," unquote. If the hair on your ass is standing on end, you must be a demographer, because as of 2025, only the halfway point betwixt these cataclysmic bellwethers, we already stand at 8 5.26 billion, even post-pandemic. 1.5 times almost the predicted population growth. And just as Pat predicted, 93.9% of the population increase didn't come from Canada, Nebraska, or fucking Sheboygan, but from Africa, Asia, and all the other places named after a 70s AOR band. Pat predicted that by 2050, Europeans would represent just 1/10 of the planet's population. And would you looky there, even the most optimistic population figures in 2025 have them at just 1/7. Though he also foresaw myriad positive reversals of fortune, some of which now appear more prescient than ever in the light of Trump impelling the Eurotrash to pay for their military obligations, torpedoing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and a little ditty by the name of Brexit. Quote, "Globalism does not offer ordinary men compelling motives for personal suffering, sacrifice, and death, but proposes a set of pale and bloodless abstractions, pale and bloodless for the very reason that they have no roots in the past, in deep feeling, or in suffering. Because it is a project of elites and because its architects are unknown and unloved, globalism will ultimately crash on the Great Barrier Reef of patriotism. That is our belief, and in that is our hope. Nations may break up, some may surrender their sovereignty to vanish inside a European superstate, but people will rebel as they did against the Soviet Empire and recreate the countries whence they came," unquote. A particularly cogent point raised by Buchanan, one I've echoed, however effectively, is that while the governmental goal of the Bolshevik Revolution was forestalled with the breaking of the Berlin Wall, the deeper motivation, written of ad astra by Vladimir Lenin, to create a new socialist man via academic indoctrination, entertainment, and an omnipresent implication that by virtue of being born, you, fellow American, are entitled to X, Y, or RE, was in fact flawlessly realized in the present. At least as illustratively in the so-called adherents of Pat Buchanan, who today parasitically leech off his legacy without troubling themselves to read a single page of The Death of the West. And today, we call these race commie cuckolds groypers. Every syndrome Buchanan bemoans as identifying the new socialist man, perpetual activism, an utter absence of personal hobbies, an outright idolatry of youth even as their race Marxist Mexican mascot prepares to catapult into his 30s, a carousel of collectivism terminating in a mass grave. All of it is as applicable to the reascendant Eurotrash right in this country as it ever was to the Leninist left, which as much as anything explains their unceasing suckathon for Stalin. Indeed, one of the many mounting proofs that Spic Fuentes and the preteen pooper posse would rather name-check Buchanan than actually read him is that the author lays the blame for European population collapse squarely at the feet of something they're increasingly kissing cousins with, socialism. Quote, "Why is this happening? Socialism, the beatific vision of European intellectuals for generations, is one reason. If everyone has the promise of a state pension, children are no longer a vital insurance policy against want in old age," argues Dr. John Wallace of Bologna's Johns Hopkins University. "If women can earn more than enough to be financially independent, a husband is no longer essential. And if you can also have sex and not babies, and this seems to be true now of Catholic Italy as it is of secular Britain, why marry? By freeing husbands, wives, and children of family responsibilities, European socialists have eliminated the need for families." Unquote! And here's the part the Juiceburg socialists hate to hear. This critique would be every bit as true of a fascist, Francoist, or Nazi socialist system as it is of the secular Eurotrash systems of today. I would remind you the Third Reich didn't simply wither up and blow away in the breeze after WW2. Many of its institutions, from German Child Protective Services to some of the earliest social assistance and Medicare programs, date back to the Buchenwald era, and some indeed remain largely untouched in function. Your race-tanky utopia won't have the capacity to repopulate itself, and the proof is modern Germany, who, with many Nazi social programs still very much in place, if not expanded, outpaces virtually every other developed nation on Earth or in Europe for the sheer shrieking depths of their death spiral. In 2002, Buchanan bewailed Germany's recalcitrant refusal to fuck. At that time, their birth rate stood for a damn decade by that point at 1.3 children per family. Today, like a groyper super IQ, it's barely above 1.2. Pat even predicted trends in the more immediate political present. Take his remarks at the close of the book, where he discusses the cynical strategy of the social Dems as they callously corral every illegal and aberrant minority into Marxian voter pig pens. It's a tactic I've discussed since even before the seismic sea change that was 2016, but as I've also pointed out, it's also the reason Dems now rely on election laws dirtier than a Charlie Sheen blood test to have a hope of hanging on to power. I like to call it scorched earth electioneering, a tacit concession that the left cannot make the sale on a party platform that looks increasingly like a hangman's scaffold, which to me explains the divide MAGA op we're witnessing on social media at present. And make no mistake, it's a product of their big pigpen strategy. You can round these Riris up and program them to pull the lever for lefties exclusively, but get them all in one room, it's Lord of the Flies, fuckers. Blacks have long-standing grievances with Latinos, lesbian third-wave feminists ain't fans of dongs in the women's restroom at the WNBA season opener, and gays don't get on with transsexuals, outside of Nick Fuentes' viewership anyways. Sure, you corralled the little piggies and impelled the one-issue wonders to vote on party lines in every election. Problem is, your coalition is more atomized than a Venezuelan drug boat, and it was only a matter of time before your cannibals buffet acquired a taste for its own. Politics cannot solve an affliction of the national soul. And wouldn't you know it, once again, Pat predicted it all over 20 years ago. Quote, "The Cultural Revolution has thus far triumphed, but its tenure, like that of Danton and Robespierre, may be brief, for the civilization it's creating cannot endure. Like heroin, it gives a good high, but imbibed too deeply, it kills. The sexual revolution has begun to devour its children. The statistics on abortion, divorce, collapsing birth rates, single-parent homes, drug use, abuse, violent crime, incarceration rates, promiscuity, and falling test scores show how this society, in which the cultural revolution is ascendant, is decomposing and dying," unquote. Hey, Pat, I know you're getting up there, but before you shuffle off to Irish Catholic heaven to car-bomb the Prots for all eternity, could you possibly predict me a night alone with Ava Green in a patent leather catsuit? Just make sure it's in my size. I'm Razor Fist! Godspeed!
I don't think it's the vision the American people need to get the economy moving again, and it's certainly not the long-term strategy to make America first again in manufacturing, industry, business the way we once were.
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.